They called me a gold digger, mocked my clothes, and made sure I knew I'd never be one of them. What they didn't know, I was the silent investor keeping their failing business alive, and I was done staying silent. I still remember the first time I met my in-laws. I had been dating Daniel for almost a year before he brought me to his parents' house. He said they were a bit traditional, and that I shouldn't take anything personally. I smiled, thinking maybe they'd warm up once they got to know me. I couldn't have been more wrong. The house was pristine and cold, like a museum you're not allowed to touch. His mother, Claudine, greeted me with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. His father, Richard, gave me a firm handshake, and then immediately turned his attention back to Daniel, asking him about the markets and golf like I wasn't even there. I sat through dinner mostly listening, smiling, and trying to contribute. Every time I did, Claudine would tilt her head slightly and blink slowly, like she couldn't understand why I was speaking. Richard never asked me a single question about myself. That night, Daniel tried to reassure me. "They're just a bit reserved," he said. "Give it time." So I did. I baked his mother's favorite lemon tart and brought it to the next family lunch. She thanked me, then immediately placed it on the sideboard and served a store-bought dessert instead. When I mentioned my degree in finance, Richard gave me a surprised look and said, "Oh, I assumed you studied art or something light." Then he chuckled like it was a compliment. Every visit was the same. I was always either invisible or the butt of some harmless joke. I offered to help in the kitchen. Claudine waved me off with a tight smile. I tried joining conversations. They quickly turned to subjects they knew I wasn't familiar with. It was like playing a game where the rules kept changing, and I was always losing. I thought maybe if I learned more about their family traditions, showed more interest in their business, family-run artisan goods company, they'd warm up. I asked questions, read up on their products, even visited one of their stores. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. One night, I overheard something that shattered whatever hope I had left. We were at a family barbecue. Daniel had gone to grab drinks from the kitchen while I sat alone by the fire pit. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, really. I wasn't. But I heard Claudine's voice from behind the hedge, low and sharp. "I still think she's after his money," she said. "She doesn't come from anything. No real family, no connections. Just look at how she dresses, like she's playing rich." Then Richard chimed in, laughing. "A classic freeloader. I give it 6 months before she starts asking for a loan, or some stake in the business." My stomach dropped. I felt heat rush to my face, a mix of humiliation and rage I didn't know how to process. I wanted to scream, to storm around that hedge and tell them exactly who I was, where I came from, what I'd achieved. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, while the fire crackled and their voices faded into the clinking of wine glasses. That night, I didn't tell Daniel what I'd heard. I just smiled and said I had a headache. He kissed my forehead and told me how happy he was that everyone was starting to get along. I realized in that moment, no matter how kind I was, how much I tried to prove myself, they had already made up their minds about me. They saw me as nothing, less than nothing. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't the girl they thought I was. And soon, they were going to find out. What my in-laws never bothered to ask, never cared to know, was who I really was before I met Daniel. They saw a quiet, unassuming woman in second-hand clothes, with no famous last name or visible symbols of wealth. What they didn't see were the years of quiet ambition, the long hours behind a screen building my own fintech consultancy from scratch. By the time I was 28, I had sold my startup for more money than I'd ever thought possible. I didn't shout it from the rooftops. I didn't buy a mansion or a luxury car. Instead, I invested it wisely, lived simply, and kept my world small. I had grown up with very little. My mother raised me on a shoestring budget, working double shifts to keep us afloat. When she died suddenly just before my college graduation, I had no one left, no family, no safety net. Just grit, a mind for numbers, and a stubborn refusal to be ordinary. That's how I met Daniel. He wasn't flashy like the other men I'd dated. He was kind, steady, interested in me for who I was, not what I owned. I liked that, and I never felt the need to correct his assumptions about my humble beginnings. Maybe I liked the simplicity. Maybe I was just tired of people treating me differently once they knew the balance in my bank account. But behind closed doors, my life was a different story. I had a private investment firm in my name. managed by a team I trusted. I donated quietly, funded scholarships for women in tech, and mentored young entrepreneurs. I wasn't just Daniel's wife. I was a self-made millionaire with a portfolio that could swallow his parents' business whole and still leave room for dessert. And as fate would have it, I soon had the chance to do just that. One night, Daniel came home from visiting his father at the office. He looked tired, distant. I asked if everything was okay, and he hesitated for a moment before sighing. "They're in trouble," he said. "The business. Sales are down, supply issues, bad management. Dad won't admit it, but they're bleeding money." I said nothing, just waited. He'd never take help from me. And if he knew it was coming from you, well, you know how he is. I did. Richard had made it very clear that he believed a man should earn his keep, and that women like me should know their place. He wouldn't take a dime from me, even if it saved his legacy. Daniel looked at me then, and there was something unspoken in his eyes. "I know this is a lot to ask," he said quietly, "but if there was any way to help, maybe through someone else? I don't know. I just don't want to see them lose everything, even if they don't deserve it." I studied him. He wasn't asking for me. He was asking for them, for the people who mocked me behind closed doors, who never once treated me like family. And yet, I nodded. "I'll take care of it," I said. "But they can never know it came from me." The next morning, I made a call to my attorney. We drafted the paperwork that same week. An anonymous investment firm would buy a minority stake in the business, offering capital under generous terms. No immediate returns, just faith in their future. We even arranged for a quiet rebranding and a marketing boost through one of my other ventures. It was surgical, clean, effective. And within 3 months, Richard and Claudine were bragging to anyone who would listen about the mystery investor who believed in their family and saved the company. They toasted to their brilliance, never once suspecting the woman sitting quietly at the end of the dinner table had pulled every string behind the scenes. Let them have their moment, I thought. But I knew that one day, the truth would come out, and when it did, they'd remember every cold smile, every insult, every whispered slur. And they'd realize they hadn't just misjudged me. They'd insulted the one person keeping them afloat. I didn't want credit. I didn't want a thank you. I just wanted peace, mostly for Daniel, who still hoped for some impossible reconciliation between me and his family. So I did what I do best. I solved the problem quietly, surgically and without ego, using one of my oldest business associates, Jordan Liang, an investor with his own private firm. I proposed a deal that would look like a lifeline falling from the sky. We'd been through countless ventures together, and he knew how to keep things discreet. "They don't get to know it's you?" he asked over coffee in my home office. "They'd never take the money if they did," I replied. "They'd rather go bankrupt than accept help from the girl. They think married for money." Jordan nodded. "All right. We'll structure it through one of my shell funds. Minority stake, no board seat, no control, just capital and consulting options if they ask. Make the terms generous," I said. "Too generous. Let them feel like they won." He smirked. "You really are too nice to them." I shrugged. Not for them, for Daniel. Within a month, the deal was finalized. Jordan's firm injected enough cash into the vineyard to not only cover their mounting debts, but allow for strategic improvements, upgraded fermentation tanks, a refreshed website, a new partnership with a boutique distributor on the East Coast. I even funneled in a quiet social media campaign through a separate company I owned, run by a team who didn't know the full story. And it worked. It worked better than I expected. 3 months after the investment, the vineyard had turned a corner. Orders picked up. The local press started mentioning the elegant revival of the Harper Estate brand. Margaret posted a photo of herself, smiling in front of their award-winning Pinot barrels, captioning it, "Trust the process. We never gave up." I wanted to laugh. They hadn't just trusted the process. They'd unknowingly trusted me. But even as the vineyard bloomed with new life, their treatment of me didn't change. At home, I was still invisible. At family dinners, they still found ways to cut me down. Margaret once scoffed at the scarf I wore, ironically a designer piece from a Paris boutique, saying, "It's sweet that you try, dear. Really." Caroline made jokes about people marrying into wealth because it's easier than making something of yourself. Harold still hadn't had a full conversation with me that lasted more than 60 seconds. It was surreal, watching them flourish on the back of my quiet generosity. while they continued to look at me like I was some lucky charity case Daniel had taken in. Daniel noticed, of course. Every slight, every cold glance, but I always stopped him from making a scene. Let it go, I'd say. It's not worth the fight. But deep down, something inside me simmered. Not anger exactly, not revenge. Just a quiet knowing, that kind of deep, undeniable clarity you get when the truth is yours alone, and you're done seeking validation from people who never earned your vulnerability. One evening, during another uncomfortable dinner on their vineyard patio, Harold raised a glass. "To the investor," he said proudly. "Whoever they are, they saved this place. They believed in us when others didn't. That's family right there. Loyalty." Daniel glanced at me. I forced a smile. And Margaret added, "If only more people in this family had that kind of faith." My fork paused midair. I didn't look up. Let them toast their phantom savior. Let them imagine it was some distant wine connoisseur with old money and no name. I didn't need the applause. I didn't need their thanks. But part of me wondered, how long would this last? How long until the mask slipped? How long until the truth, so carefully hidden, refused to stay buried? Because the thing about secrets is, they don't stay secret forever. It was Caroline's birthday, and Margaret had insisted on a formal dinner at the vineyard's newly renovated tasting room, complete with crystal glasses, a 5-course menu, and a guest list full of local influencers and family friends. The kind of evening where appearances mattered more than authenticity, where smiles were rehearsed and compliments laced with poison. I had considered not going. I told Daniel I didn't feel like playing the part of the grateful outsider again, but he asked me just this once to come for him. So I put on my most elegant black dress, the one they'd probably mistake for an imitation, and stepped into their world one more time. The evening unfolded like most of their gatherings, glasses clinking, laughter echoing, Margaret parading guests through the newly refurbished production, wing as if she'd built it herself. Not one mention of the investor, not one acknowledgement that just 6 months ago they were on the brink of collapse. I kept to myself, offering polite smiles and the occasional comment when directly addressed. But I could feel the tension, the way Margaret's eyes lingered on me a second too long, the subtle snickers from Caroline's friends. I was the stain on their picture-perfect evening. The outsider who still didn't belong. Then came the toast. Caroline stood, radiant in a red dress that screamed for attention. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began. "It means a lot to celebrate with people who actually care about family." The word actually hung in the air like a knife. "And of course," she continued, raising her glass, "I want to thank my mother and father for always setting the bar high, for showing me what hard work and class look like. Some people marry into a family like this and never quite grasp what that means." Laughter, nervous, complicit. My cheeks burned, but I stayed still. "And to my brother," she added, locking eyes with Daniel. "You could have had anyone, but I guess love makes you blind sometimes." That was it. Daniel stood up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. "Enough," he said sharply. The laughter stopped. Heads turned. Margaret's smile faltered. "I've let all of you disrespect my wife for years. I've swallowed it, ignored it, hoped you'd come around. But tonight, you crossed a line." Margaret's voice dripped with false calm. "Daniel, sit down. This isn't the place." "No," he cut her off. "This is exactly the place." He turned to the room, voice steady but shaking slightly with emotion. "You all talk about loyalty, class, family. You pat yourselves on the back for surviving the vineyard's worst year, but you didn't survive it on your own. You were saved." Harold frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the investor," Daniel said. "The one you all keep praising like some ghostly guardian angel." The room went quiet, utterly still. Daniel looked at me. His hand found mine under the table. "It was her," he said. "It was my wife. She saved this business. She funded the entire recovery, anonymously. She did what none of you deserved." Margaret's wineglass trembled in her hand. That's ridiculous. No, Mom, it's true. Every penny, the marketing, the equipment, the consultant you keep bragging about hiring, all of it. Because she believed in us, even after everything you said, everything you did." I sat frozen, exposed, but not afraid. Harold looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I did it for Daniel. Not for you." Silence. Crushing, suffocating silence. Then Margaret stammered, We had no idea. If we had known..." You would have refused it, I said, standing now. You would have let your pride burn everything to the ground. And you would have blamed me for the ashes. Caroline's face had gone pale. Margaret tried again, her voice trembling. Darling, we may have misjudged, but... No, I said. You judged exactly how you wanted to, and you were wrong. With that, I stepped away from the table. Daniel at my side, the weight of years of silence finally lifting from my chest. Behind us, I could hear their voices, shocked, scrambling, soft apologies floating after me like feathers too late to catch fire. But I didn't stop, because the truth had finally spoken. And there was no going back. The morning after the dinner, I expected to wake up with regret, a dull ache of guilt, maybe even the urge to smooth things over. But instead, I felt light, steady, like something heavy had finally fallen off my shoulders. Daniel and I stayed in a quiet hotel downtown. He held my hand as we sipped coffee in bed, the early light casting soft gold across the room. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. He had stood by me, spoken the truth, and that was enough. My phone buzzed nonstop for hours. Missed calls from Margaret, a long, clumsy apology text from Caroline, an email from Harold, formal and stiff, thanking me for my contribution and expressing a sincere hope that we can move forward as a family. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I turned my attention to the business. I called Jordan and asked him to initiate the next phase of our plan. Quietly, respectfully, but firmly, we would increase our oversight. Not because I wanted control, but because I no longer trusted them to run something I had saved. We brought in a financial advisor to oversee expenses, recruited a young vineyard manager with innovative ideas, even restructured the marketing team under a new creative lead, someone who wouldn't cower under Harold's outdated methods. The vineyard thrived, better than ever, actually. For the first time in years, the brand began trending in the right circles. Orders came in from major distributors. The wine was featured in a regional magazine, and social media buzzed with praise for the Harper Estate revival. And still, the in-laws called. They tried awkward brunch invitations, offers to start fresh, even a handwritten note from Margaret that smelled faintly of her perfume and desperation. It said all the right things, but I had learned something in the silence, between their cruelty and their apologies. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, and trust once broken doesn't grow back in a single season. One Saturday, a package arrived. Inside was a bottle of wine from the original vintage I'd saved, the one produced the year Daniel and I were married. The label had a new quote on the back, printed in small cursive letters. To those who believed in us before we believed in ourselves. No signature. But I knew. It was their way of saying thank you without asking for forgiveness. That evening, I sat on our balcony with the unopened bottle beside me, staring out over the city lights. Daniel joined me, his arm around my shoulder, the silence between us comfortable now, not heavy. They're trying, he said. I know. Do you think you'll ever let them back in? I thought about it for a long time. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe, but not like before. There's a part of me they'll never get access to again. I gave them my kindness once. Now they'll have to earn even my time. Daniel nodded, understanding. He always did. I took a breath, let the wind wash over me, and for the first time in a long while I felt whole. Not because I'd won, not because I'd revealed the truth, but because I had done it without losing myself. I didn't fight back with fury. I didn't seek revenge. I simply showed them who I truly was and walked away standing tall. Still, a part of me wondered, could they change? Could people like Margaret and Harold ever truly see beyond the stories they told themselves? Or was this the final chapter in a book we'd never finish together? I looked at the wine bottle again, unopened, waiting. Maybe some doors aren't meant to be closed forever. But that doesn't mean I'll be the one to open them.